When you have a history of greatness, the real challenge starts after the finish line. When victory alone isn't enough, you chase something greater, no matter how difficult the path. On the dirt, in the sand, and beyond. The new 2024 Ridgeline Passport and Pilot, part of our most rugged trail sport lineup yet. From Honda.
Welcome to Bayou Time. I'm Jacob DeGate. It's my pleasure to be joined by Lieutenant Blake Tabor with the Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant, thank you very much for joining us.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Okay, I see that you had a recent arrest of a man in connection with a domestic violence incident that you're here to report on. Can you tell us a little bit what happened?
Sure, yeah. So this kind of came to a head on Sunday morning on October 20th. We were called to a residence in response to some domestic violence type activity that was transpiring. Once we got there, we quickly made contact with the victim in the 400 block of West Side Boulevard, who began to report the disturbances near her home. She also quickly identified a Dakota Dayrosh, who's a 33-year-old male of Montague. You see him photographed here as being the perpetrator in those particular crimes. So again, the victim, who we are not giving her identity out for obvious reasons, began to report that she was at a local store in Terrebonne Parish where she exited that store and spotted Mr. Dayrosh. It's our understanding that she had been having problems with him, stalking her and having that type of activity when it comes to their relationship, which had, stopped several months prior to this time. So ultimately, as she attempted to leave the parking lot, Mr. Dayrosh followed her. In an attempt to avoid going to her home, she began to turn down some side streets as she was trying to contact law enforcement and family. And he intentionally struck her vehicle on at least 2 occasions, causing her to come to a halt. She ultimately retreated into her apartment where she felt somewhat safe, I assume, at that point. And then it was several hours later when Mr. Dayrosh arrived once again at her place of residency and forced his way into her home. Once he did that, of course, a physical confrontation took place. She had made several attempts to contact law enforcement where he retrieved that phone from her and stopped her ability to do that. So anytime we have that type of behavior, it becomes extremely dangerous. So ultimately, we went there. She did have signs of injury and obvious indications of a disturbance, although Mr. Dayrosh left prior to our arrival. So again, we did our due diligence, as we always do in these types of cases, and we used all of our resources available to try to locate him, which we were not able to do at the time. But the following day, on October 21st at about 1 p.m., we did have an officer from our agency that did locate Mr. Dayrosh driving the vehicle that was given to us as a suspect vehicle, and he was quickly taken into custody. So we're glad to report that. He's ultimately still remaining jailed on an $86,000 bond, and his charges were aggravated criminal damage to property, home invasion, stalking, and of course interfering with the emergency system in connection with the incident.
Well, that certainly is a scary incident that luckily, the victim was able to be found safe and this didn't go further, because that certainly is a scary situation.
Absolutely. And the important thing to point out in these cases is, it's not always a situation where we know the victims are always going to contact law enforcement. There's a lot of emotion that goes into domestic violence cases. And the victims need to understand that we're here to benefit them. So when something like this happens, or you start to see red flags in a relationship, by all means, call law enforcement and let us get involved. There are a ton of resources, more resources here in Terrebonne Parish than we can talk about for the next 2 minutes, that could, be privy to them and helping them establish a better life and a disconnect from these particular type of individuals.
Certainly, and I understand we have another domestic violence situation where
Absolutely.
You're looking for a suspect that we want to get into right now.
We are. This was another similar case. We are currently seeking to locate a Jamar DePaul Johnson, who is a 35-year-old male from Labadyville. You see him photographed here. Again, this was a recent case that kind of culminated on October 18th in another domestic violence incident that happened on Goodman Court here in Houma. So the information that was contained in this particular investigation was the female victim, again, who we are not identifying in this case for obvious reasons, was at home asleep when Mr. Johnson entered the home forcefully and, of course, committed a lot of infractions and damaged her pretty well physically. Lots of cuts and scrapes on her face, which required medical attention. So at this point, we have charges on him for home invasion and simple criminal damage to property. He's identified as a male, 5'5", 120 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. And of course, our sheriff is very interested in anyone that may know the whereabouts of Mr. Johnson to please contact the sheriff's office immediately and let us know his whereabouts so we can get him in jail where he deserves to be.
All right. Is there a particular number that they should contact?
Sure. I mean, obviously, they can contact our sheriff's office directly at 985-876-2500. Also, information can be reported anonymously through Bayou Region Crime Stoppers at 1-800-743-7433, or they can always go on the Bayou Tips mobile app and report that information, and there could be a reward associated with that for his capture, too.
Okay, so hopefully anybody out there that has any information that may lead to his whereabouts, that's important, and also ultimately for the safety of the victim, that we want to make sure that he's apprehended and faces justice for his alleged crimes.
Absolutely.
Well, we thank you for coming on. I know this is difficult every time it's a domestic violence situation, but like you said earlier, it's important to always get the police involved, sheriff's office involved, so they can, help as best that they can.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks again, and stay tuned for more right here on HTV.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System. Your health is our legacy. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights.